Well, to further discuss international efforts to combat climate change, our reporter Su Yuting spoke with Mr. Achim Steiner. He is the Executive Director of United Nations Environment Program. Steiner warned that time was running out to find an international agreement, and he also hailed Chinese investments in green energy.
Mr. Achim Steiner, good to have you on CCTV News. We know that the Lima conference is a very important meeting as it sets term for the Paris Agreement in 2015. With the global climate change agreement is a very tricky issue to tackle. What do you say would be the expectations and challenges for the Lima conference?
Member states will at the conference in Lima be working on all the major elements that constitute the potential outcome for 2015. Some key issues that will have to be addressed is what are some of the baselines, for example, from which year will countries measure their voluntary commitments that they are willing to present next year to the international community. What kind of accounting system do we use? What would be the context also in which, for example, the financing and the technology support and transfer would take place? So we will see in Lima, I think, both a lot of detail, but ultimately the outcome should be a draft text, even if it has some brackets left that will preoccupy countries in negotiating over the next year.
Well, you are talking about the financial assistance and technological assistance to the developing countries, and China hopes that the Lima conference could uphold the principles of common but differentiated responsibilities. So what do you think about could be the appropriate and fair measures for the international climate change cooperation?
First of all, there is a question of which countries are major contributors historically speaking, which countries are today major emitters of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and what is the formula that we can use to, first of all, achieve action in all countries. Secondly, the principle accepts that some countries have different responsibilities from each other, but there are also means by which we can, through technology support, through financing, address those. I think the principle of common but differentiated responsibility is not in question in the United Nations. I think the more central question now will be how can every country scale up its actions, because clearly the IPCC, the scientific body, has told us that somewhere by the second half of this century we will have to live in a world where we have essentially zero net emissions. That means we must emit only as much as nature can store in terms of carbon dioxide. That means a transformation in all economies.
We're talking about the emission level, how to cut the emission, and China has already made a target for its emissions to peak around 2030. So what's your assessment of China's efforts in improving the air quality and alleviating global warming?
I think China's investments in renewable energy, in energy efficiency, in public transport, particularly during the global financial crisis, we also saw a significant green stimulus package in China. These are all measures that have enabled China to, first of all, test new technologies, to scale up their investments, and I think have contributed also to President Xi Jinping's announcement of, for instance, the target for peaking by 2030 with carbon emissions, and also the targets that are being set for renewable energy, for instance. I think this is part of China's story over the last 10 years, which is to not doubt the necessity of acting on climate change, but rather to identify what are its opportunities and what are its constraints. And from there you derive national strategies and policies.